There are 28 days until Election Day. And last night, CBS aired its 60 Minutes interview with Kamala Harris. Now, the program has interviewed the candidates in every presidential election dating back to 1968. But Donald Trump backed out this year. And before airing the interview with Vice President Harris, 60 Minutes began with a note about Trump. Here's part of that explanation.
It's been a tradition for more than half a century that the major party candidates for president sit down with 60 Minutes in October. In 1968, it was Richard Nixon and Hubert Humphrey. This year, Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump accepted our invitation. But unfortunately, last week, Trump canceled. The campaign offered shifting explanations. First, it complained that we would fact-check the interview. We fact-check every story. Later, Trump said he needed an apology for his interview in 2020. Trump claims correspondent Lesley Stahl said in that interview that Hunter Biden's controversial laptop came from Russia. She never said that. Trump has said his opponent doesn't do interviews because she can't handle them. He had previously declined another debate with Harris, so tonight may have been the largest audience for the candidates between now and Election Day.
Wow. You know, I've got to ask Jonathan Lemire. Well, before I ask, I think it's fascinating. Being fact-checked. I love when people fact-check me. I really do. I love, if I make a mistake, I want to know what I said that was wrong. People can disagree with me. Opinions are one thing, but I want to be fact-checked. If I say something wrong, I want to know that. Like most adults that I know are the same way. The fact that Donald Trump and his vice presidential nominee are so horrified at the prospect of being fact-checked suggests, well, it's the tell that they're still lying this week about the 2020 election. They're lying in a way that is very destructive for the people of North Carolina and South Carolina about hurricane relief, in a way that's getting in the way, and in a way that Republican governors are pushing back against them on. They're lying about dogs and cats being eaten in Ohio when the Republican governor there is saying that's a lie as well. The lies continue over and over again. But he doesn't go on because of the fact check, right? Why are they scared of fact check? Because they lie all the time, and you literally can see every day them lying on the campaign trail. Then he says he doesn't go on for an apology. He wants an apology from Lesley Stahl for something that never even happened. Again, deranged, disconnected, deluded, whatever you want to call it, or maybe just scared. And then finally, he says, Kamala Harris, this is really bizarre. I can't sit down on interviews because she doesn't know the issues. Again, as Hyland always says, it's either confession or projection. Here, Donald Trump is the one who skipped the 60 Minutes interview. First time in 50 years a candidate has done that. And is the one that refused to do a debate, even on Fox News. Even on Fox News, who many hosts on that network are echoing Donald Trump's disinformation.
They can't do a real interview.
And there's actually one of their most popular hosts suggests that civil war is better than voting, and that they need to move past voting. And yet she's willing to debate him there, and he refuses to do it. So last night, as I was watching this, I started asking John, like, what's going on, man? Like, what? I've heard from people inside his campaign, I know you have too, though they're very careful, a real frustration that they have no idea what this guy is going to do. He doesn't do the things he should do to win, and they can't control him at all. What are you hearing? Is there an understanding on his part that he is no longer up to sitting for serious interviews where people challenge him? Is his age, as Peter Baker wrote in the New York Times yesterday, really preventing him from doing serious interviews. The debate, not doing the debate. I'm dumbfounded because this is just not the behavior of somebody who wants to win an election.
No. So two things here. First of all, Vice President Harris did receive criticism, as we well know, in recent weeks for not doing many interviews. And look, some Democrats are really anxious, saying, look, she needs to do more. That is now changing. She sat for 60 Minutes. That aired last night. Today, she's with The View, Howard Stern, Stephen Colbert. She did a popular podcast over the weekend. She's really ramping up her own media appearances. And again, she's been consistent, saying, hey, I want a second debate with Donald Trump. Trump is the one who said no to the debate, and Trump is the one who said no to 60 Minutes. And there are a couple of things at play here. First of all, we heard J.D. Vance, as you alluded to, in the vice presidential debate, being upset, saying to moderators, wait, I thought you weren't going to fact check me, when they did, even modestly, because he was lying about something. And of course, now Trump did not want to submit himself to the fact checking last night. And this is something his aides have grown more and more frustrated with, their inability to steer him. And I know people watch this will say, well, no one can ever control Donald Trump. And that's largely true. But there were moments earlier in this campaign where Susie Wiles, Chris LaCivita, the longtime Republican operatives who were running the campaign, were able to instill at least some sort of messaging through Trump. This is what we want to talk about this election. Now, it was much more effective when their opponent was President Biden than it is Vice President Harris. But even that is now gone. Trump just says whatever he wants. He only sits for friendly interviews. They ask him. I was talking to a Republican over the weekend saying if he would just talk about the economy every day. And even though the metrics are still good, but a lot of Americans don't feel it, they're like, if he would just talk about the economy every day, we'd win. But he can't, Willie. He can't and he won't. He wants to relitigate past grievances with Leslie Stahl. He wants to say racist things about migrants. He wants to just fight, and they can't keep him on message. And right now, there's a refusal for him to be challenged whatsoever, both in interviews, and I'm told, and I think Joe's heard this as well, even by his aides. He simply won't listen to them anymore. He does only what he wants to do.
So, Gene, to Jonathan and Joe's point here, Donald Trump is speaking only now in the echo chamber, exclusively in the echo chamber. He's preaching to the converted at rallies and in the interviews that he does do. You look at 60 Minutes, whether Donald Trump likes the interviewer or not, what are you going to get? 15, 20 million, probably at least, people watching that. The idea of this election is to convince some people who may be sitting on the fence, some people in the suburbs, to come to your side, to persuade them. He's just not doing any of that. So it's fair to ask strategically what he's thinking here with 4 weeks left until Election Day. What is his plan? How is he going about this? And by the way, as we talk about his outrageous and disgusting lies, we're looking at, on the bottom right of our screen, this hurricane that's coming, Milton, which is massive and is likely to be catastrophic. And he's still out there telling lies about the federal response to the previous hurricane, which Republican governors and mayors and senators are having to go out and rebut and saying the feds are doing their job to help us.
Yeah, those lies about the hurricane are worse than disgusting and
dangerous.
And they're really unforgivable, especially given that the second monster hurricane is now barreling down on Florida, and all he can think about is how to lie about the federal response to Helene, which was a total disaster in southern Appalachia. 60 Minutes was an opportunity for Donald Trump to talk to Republicans, maybe the suburban Republicans and right-leaning independents who they just aren't sure they can vote for this guy again. He's crazy. He's exhausting. January 6th, they can't quite get there, and it was a chance to speak to them and reassure them that he would be actually a different person because he is Donald Trump and we know who he is, but he didn't take that opportunity. Somebody I know quite well always says that politics is a game of addition, not subtraction. He had a chance to do addition on 60 Minutes, and he just passed it up.
Yeah, and instead he was interviewed by Laura Ingraham, who asked him if he was going to assure people that he would respect the rule of law
Oh, I'm so glad she asked him that.
And she said, a lot of people think you're going to lock up political opponents, and suggest there's been this story, the New York Times, about people in the media, people that he didn't like, you're going to lock them up, and you're not going to do that, are you? And he said, yeah, a lot of people want me to do that. They think it's a good idea. So
she pushed back hard, right?
She pushed back, and she's done that 2 times. Sean Hannity's done it on the dictator comment, and they keep saying, you're not really going to do this, are you? And he goes on and says, yes, he is. And that's what he's doing, as Willie said, speaking to the echo chamber. And a dark conspiratorial echo chamber, and we're going to get to it, but also sounding very much, how do you say it? I mean, he's talking about genes, and that immigrants have bad genes. It's kind of fascist, I think the Nazis.
We'll have more about that.
One of the most common MAGA talking points about Kamala Harris that you've probably heard is taking a hard fall today. Trump has been arguing that she wasn't doing any or enough press interviews. And you'll remember when she first stepped up as the nominee, it was a frenetic stretch. Well, the harder they come, the harder they fall, one and all, as Jimmy Cliff famously put it. Respect. Because that would apply right now. This MAGA talking point is taking a hard fall as Harris steps up to journalistic interviews while Trump ducks them, like on 60 Minutes. And Harris also leading a media blitz this week from classic forums like The View, haven't seen Trump on there recently, to Howard Stern, which I'll get to in a minute, to these new media podcasts where she's engaging with different independent media hosts and their sometimes younger audiences. These are the mainstream outlets which many campaigns court. And Harris is using them to, of course, take the hard questions sometimes, also get her message out. She talked a range of policy and took the questions again on the forum that most nominees usually go to, both party nominees. But these are the kind of questions that this cycle, she is the only nominee answering on 60 Minutes.
So what kind of gun do you own, and when and why did you get it?
I have a Glock.
Was it a mistake to loosen the immigration policies as much as you did?
It's a long-standing problem, and solutions are at hand.
But we're dealing with the real world here.
But the real world includes...
How are you going to get this through Congress?
You know, when you talk quietly with a lot of folks in Congress, they know exactly what I'm talking about.
That's some of the back and forth. The interview ran about 20 minutes. Again, Trump was not there. Those would be fair questions for him as well. How are you going to get something through Congress? This Congress, which has had multiple Republican speakers, has not been super effective in terms of passing a lot of domestic legislation. I don't say that as a burn, just an observation. So that's just some of this playing out on 60 Minutes. But there's also a larger dynamic. If this were a one-off about one show, even a great classic, well-watched news show like 60 Minutes, you might say, okay, the candidate has an issue with that show. Let's not make a whole meal out of it. But I'm going to show you the evidence that there is a whole meal here, even if some of the ingredients are toxic and people have to make up their own mind about what they want to ingest. The information we ingest can be as damaging as other things we put in our body. But the theme here is something I told you about last night. It's bigger than 60 Minutes or any single show. We are seeing Donald Trump run and duck from any place where he thinks he might be held accountable or fact-checked in real time. And that includes places he used to go all the time. Which brings us to the shock jock himself, although he's evolved over the years, Howard Stern. What does Howard Stern have in common with a venerated news magazine show like 60 Minutes? Well, they're both places that were Trump's stomping grounds. Remember, Trump previously went on 60 Minutes and did it last cycle, and we mentioned that. Trump and Stern go back many years. This is actually a picture of then the shock jock and then the real estate magnate, or pretend magnate, depending on which financials you believe, together at one of Trump's weddings, his first. Donald Trump has gone on Howard Stern's show dozens of times. Politico has a whole breakdown on that. So this is exactly the kind of thing that Donald Trump would use on his way up, if you want to call it that. And he used to be able to handle questions from Howard Stern about a whole range of topics. Now what we have is Kamala Harris going on Howard Stern and Donald Trump running away. So his only interviews this week have been on Fox and on a conservative radio show where he thought he would get a certain type of treatment. On Howard Stern, again, like 60 Minutes, a big platform that reaches millions, and not all of them are automatically Biden-Harris administration supporters. Kamala Harris used this interview while Trump runs and hides to discuss her approach, why she's engaging these different forums, and also put it in the context of what I told you is larger than just beef with one show. The larger theme, which you and I may know about and people who follow the news may know about, but in October, as other people tune in, the fact that Donald Trump has a problem with the courts, independent journalism, and any other independent power structure that might hold him accountable, which raises questions about what his second term would be like.
He says he's going to be a dictator on day one. Understand what dictators do. They jail journalists. They put people who are protesting in the street in jail.
He said he thinks he wants to go after Jimmy Kimmel, a comedian. He wants to go after Stephen Colbert and Seth Meyers.
Donald.
Now, if Jimmy Kimmel's not safe, who's safe? It would be a laughing matter, except it isn't. Because those instincts, which Donald Trump is not disavowing, the guy's literally running for president. If you believe these state polls, he seems tied. And even in that context, where the political benefits might run the other way, he still has to blurt out dictator for some of the time. Abuse of power, some of the time. Prosecute his enemies, maybe. So this is serious stuff. Harris is using this broad swath of different approaches, forums, and media to reach people. That includes the journalistic outlets which do fact check. It includes these radio shows that Trump used to go on when he wasn't running scared. While Trump is burrowing deeper into what you might call his own self-imposed content tunnel. The candidate who, as I reminded you at the top of the show, accused his opponent of ducking hard questions is the one actually avoiding all the hard questions, whether that's from Howard Stern or 60 Minutes, and then seeking refuge on Fox. The harder they fall. Fox is an outlet which broadcasts so many proven election lies that after Donald Trump's loss in 2020, it broadcast those lies and then had to pay a record defamation penalty. So this is not exactly a 60 Minutes level interview here, or even a shock jock interview. Historically, this has been a safe space for MAGA snowflakes. Their term, not ours. But the defamation penalty was so costly that I can show you tonight how this is even changing things over there. Even MAGA allied hosts are doing some fact checking of Trump in real time. So to set up what I'm about to show you, I want to just show a basic fact. Amidst these terrible hurricanes and all the risk we are facing, Kamala Harris visited North Carolina yesterday. Now, that's not a big deal one way or the other. It's what you might expect a sitting vice president and major party nominee to do. I could tell you both candidates, Trump and Harris, have been talking about these threats and have visited some of the affected areas, although on the facts they have a different approach. But that public observable fact is known. So when Donald Trump went on Fox lying and claiming the opposite about Harris, Laura Ingraham corrected him in front of the Fox audience.
But she shouldn't be there anyway. She should be, I would say, North Carolina is bad, is so bad. And
she was there today for 3 hours, I believe, Kamala Harris.
Now, that is not how many Fox evening hosts handled Trump's election lies last campaign season. It is a shift. And notice it comes amidst what I'm telling you about, Trump running away from these other forums I mentioned because of fact-checking, because any adversarial effort to hold him accountable is something that right now he would rather avoid and run from, even if it squares the circle and shreds his own talking points about the other team doing the thing he's doing. The point I'm exploring here with you tonight is not chiefly about ideology or partisanship, not about whether people vote for one party or the other, which is a rich tradition in our country, and you should do your homework and vote for whoever you choose. I'm not speaking in partisanship, which comes up plenty in campaigns. I'm speaking about a deeper fault line, which I also reported on last night. It's a fault line over facts right now. The MAGA GOP increasingly uses lies as a litmus test. You have to support the lies for Trump to be in good standing with the party. and Trump awaits a federal trial about election fraud and coup lies. And when a political party wields lies and propaganda for power, it does not usually stay neatly contained to just some lies for the leader or just one topic. Those are the kind of rationalizations we've heard, even right here on this desk, from some Trump allies or former allies. The lies and disinfo, for example, are spreading now to the federal government's response to Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton, which is barreling towards Florida, and they have consequences. Emergency response officials say the misinformation is confusing residents who could be in danger. There are echoes here of what it was like when Donald Trump was president. You remember the COVID response, the many lies, the disinformation, the bleach. People have memory hold that, but that matters. That's the person in charge, how they wield the awesome authority they have in office. Bob Woodward now revealing new scoops about Trump sending COVID tests to Putin's regime back then. There's echoes of then-President Trump doing the disinfo he did in real time when he infamously doctored a hurricane map with a Sharpie. The mayor of Tampa, which is in the hurricane path, is not making a political or campaign point today, but in a preview of what could be a more serious problem if Trump were reelected, pleading with residents to please, for your own safety, focus on the facts from the credible sources, including emergency responders, not political propaganda designed to gain power, even if it endangers your life.
Please don't get political on this. This storm is going to affect everybody, and we are getting the help that we need from all of the different governmental officials. Hate to break it to you, but a lot of what you see on social media is not factual. Stick with the facts.
Stick with the facts. And those kinds of officials and authorities generally avoid going further to stir up even more partisanship by saying they're responding to MAGA lies or Donald Trump. They're trying to do this in as clear and straightforward a way as possible. But honoring those facts sometimes does require being clear with the public, clear with you about who's doing the lying. This is not a drill. This is not a movie where we imagine a hurricane or a pandemic or foreign policy issues that turn on life and death outcomes to illustrate what we need. This is really happening. I've told you before, politics is often too important to be left to politicians. Tonight I will update that with something else that is basic, but sometimes I share with you basic, straightforward things and repeat them. The truth is way too important to be left up to political liars who do not seem to care whether you, the public, live or die.
I worked in the Trump administration.
Never in a million years did I ever think that I'd be working in the White House with a president that didn't care about the American people.
He would suggest not giving disaster relief to states that hadn't voted for him.
I remember one time after a wildfire in California, he wouldn't send relief because it was a Democratic state. So we went as far as looking up how many votes he got in those impacted areas to show him these are people who voted for you. This isn't normal. The job of the president is to protect Americans, regardless of politics.
If Trump's elected again, there'll be no one to stop his worst instincts. You'll have yes men help him implement Project 2025's agenda. Unchecked power, no guardrails.
They will be serving one man. I am voting for Kamala Harris because she will put the safety and security of every American first, whether they voted for her or not.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
Vaughn, it's a hard thing as a journalist to cover his indifference to human suffering and the need of his staffers to show him that some of the people suffering are his supporters. That step has to be taken is so extraordinary, and it's almost beyond a political or a policy tick. It's a psychological impediment to leading if you're indifferent to people that are victims of the wildfires.
Right.
Tell me what this picture looks like, sort of fleshed out with 8 or 9 years of reporting.
Exactly. 8 or 9 years of reporting. Let's be very clear. What makes this moment in time different than 2017, 2018, 2019 is that we have a body of evidence of who Donald Trump is. In time and again, when he was in the White House, again, the difference between that time and this time is when he was in the White House, he ran a propaganda campaign. If you talked about wildfires in 2018, 2019, 2020, he said that he was going to make the people of California, the state of California, pay because they hadn't done their part to groom the forest, not to mention the fact that most of that was federal land where those wildfires were taking place. But then I remember being in Phoenix in 2020 at the height of the pandemic. Donald Trump flew into town for a campaign rally, an indoor rally, on the day that they had just announced the highest single-day death total, the highest single-day case total. And what did Donald Trump do? He tried to dispute the actual deaths in Arizona. He tried to dispute the statistics and the numbers because it worked against him in his political campaign. You look at Puerto Rico. When 3,000 people died in Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria in 2017, what did Donald Trump do? He tweeted, 3,000 people did not die in the 2 hurricanes that hit Puerto Rico. He said this was done by Democrats in order to make me look as bad as possible. 3,000 people died in Puerto Rico, and Donald Trump tried to tell the American people it's not as bad. What's different now is he's not in office here. And let's be very clear about this, too, here. I've covered a great number of storms over the years, and I don't envy any of our teammates that are down in North Carolina, that are down in Florida right now. People are desperate. And what we are watching is somebody use his political position as the nominee for president to exploit people that are hungry, don't have working restrooms. These are folks that have lost all of their belongings. Some of them have lost their loved ones. And that is what our team on the ground is currently covering. There's more than 3,300 current National Guard and active military that are down in North Carolina alone. There are people that are in need. And when we see what Elon Musk, in the form of his tweets over the last several days, suggesting that FEMA is not doing their part, that the Biden-Harris administration are letting the people down, that they are being stranded, Donald Trump reveals what his motive here is. Just this morning saying, quote, I can't imagine anybody living in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Florida, or Tennessee voting for her, saying that they have been stranded by her. This is a moment where people are vulnerable, and Donald Trump is using, without offering any specifics, he's not pointing to a certain town that is being ignored. He's not pointing to a certain story about somebody being ignored. He is painting a broad brushstroke of people that are going through very difficult times. And I think, again, I come back to my very first point is we have a body of evidence now of how Donald Trump tries to use this. And there was a difference from the time that he was in the White House when it was to deny reality versus now when it's to deny reality, but in a little different way, but to exploit it.
He lost in 2020. Are they sure this is a political winner for him?
It's a good question. There are people that we know that he wants to galvanize to come out and vote. People that he needs to come out and vote for him, those Trump supporters that he needs to turn into Trump voters here. And I don't know what it does for the middle part of the country that maybe voted for him in 2016, Joe Biden in 2020. I don't think that we have the reporting to really know the answer to that question. But Donald Trump, by this, without going into his mind, I think that this is a pure suggestion that he is trying to tell the North Carolina voters that are currently going through chaos and crisis that they need to show up in 3 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now to vote and make sure that they are voters. Because there's a lot of people that don't vote. He needs his supporters to go out there and vote, and it's going and directly aiming at those folks to play off of this.
First thing, clip that first part of what he just said, just laid out that arc of analysis of how Trump's behavior is now categorized for us. We can see it now and understand it better because of what happened while he was in office. That's one. Two, Vaughn put his finger on a very interesting aspect of what's happening in this campaign, which is why I am probably more bullish than some of my peers and friends who are a little bit more bearish. And that is the fact that you have voters out there who have moved off of Trump. No one really wants to delve into what that looks like. You've seen some analysis of it. There's polling out today, for example, that shows that weakening. Donald Trump saw this in his private polling about a month ago. How do we know that? Because what did he do? He went out and he told his voters how he needed them to behave. 2 months before that, what did he tell them? I don't need y'all to vote. We got this, right? We good. We don't need you to go out and do all that extra stuff. The RNC is sitting there frozen in place. There's no ground game to be operationalized against what's coming from the Democrats. And there are two campaigns underway right now. One is the one that LaCivita and Wiles wants to run, and it's the one that Donald Trump is running. And the one that is being run by Donald Trump is running into the very roadblock that Vaughn just put up. He's seeping voters. And what Kamala's trying to do is sop them up.
And what I would say is they're mutually exclusive paths,
Yeah.
right? His plan is re-winning the people that didn't leave after January 6th.
Right.
A smart campaign, and I'm not saying anything else about La Vida, but a strategic campaign. Let me not call it smart because it's cynical as you know what. But a strategic campaign would be viewing those people as, you know, in your column, and you'd be getting Trump's incapable of doing that. And I mean, the other thing I would add is that the Trump version has Elon Musk cheering, literally, like he binge cheer and cheering behind him, which is not any strategist's idea of a winning closing argument.
Real fast about North Carolina. That's the one battleground state that Donald Trump won in 2016 and 2020. And if he loses this election, we're going to be hearing about North Carolina if, in fact, he loses North Carolina. The reason Michael Whatley is the new chair of the RNC is because Donald Trump was convinced that Michael Whatley was the only chair in the country that was able to stop the steal in his state. That is why he's now the national chair. That's why he's made more than 7 stops over just the last 2 months in the state. If he doesn't win North Carolina, look at this hurricane being repoliticized by Donald Trump.
And I guess then the last point is to go back to your point about what happened a month ago. A month ago, the polls started to move in North Carolina.
Yep.
So good. Thank you so much for bringing. I knew you'd bring the receipts, and they're all over my table. Thank you very much. Thank you for your report.
Yeah, well, you know, and it's very interesting just going back over this. And Laura Ingraham called him out several times on misrepresentations or lies. But you just look this week, and again, so much is thrown at us. It is so important that people look and take a tally just this week, right? Donald Trump still lying about the 2020 election, still saying that it was stolen from him. He now has J.D. Vance lying, saying it was stolen from him. You have U.S. senators, Republican United States senators refusing to say that Donald Trump lost on Sunday's show. So there's a 2020 election lie that he continues this week. There's also, of course, the lie about the hurricanes, saying that they're doing a terrible job on the hurricanes when you have the Republican governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp, saying they're doing a really good job. You have the South Carolina governor, McMaster, he's a conservative guy, saying, yeah, they're doing a good job. They're staying in touch.
Roy Cooper is on the show.
Roy Cooper, a Democrat, but you have Tom Tillis, the senator from that state, saying that they're working really well with the federal government. You have the governor of Tennessee, a conservative guy, saying, yeah, we're coordinating very well. And he even said this disinformation that's coming from the Trump campaign also may be coming from our foreign enemies who are trying to do what they did in past elections and sow distrust. So you have that lie. And then, of course, you've got the dogs and cats, seeding dogs and cats. That lie, of course, called out by the Republican governor, who was a 2-term Republican senator up in Ohio. But even what Donald Trump said about why he wouldn't do 60 Minutes last night.
Unbelievable.
What did he say? First of all, he was angry about the fact check.
Yeah.
And of course, as I've said before, I love when people fact check me. I love, you can disagree with me on things, that's fine. But if I have a fact wrong, I want to be fact checked. And he and J.D. Vance, very angry about getting fact checked, which tells you all you need to know about all the lies that they're telling. Then he demanded an apology from Leslie Stahl for something that never happened 4 years ago. So you have that. And finally, I just think he's gotten to a point where he skipped the debate that Kamala Harris said I'll do on Fox News.
Happy to do it.
He skipped the 60 Minutes interview, and it just has to lead you, which I was thinking last night, what is going on here? He needs to get out of that bubble. Why is he not out of the bubble? And I just think in his gut, he knows he may not be up to it anymore.
Yeah,
especially that's my best guess. Because,
side by side with her.
Right.
I think that he's uncomfortable on a number of levels. I'm not going to get mean about it.
Somebody 20 years younger than him. I mean, that's best guess, but we don't know.
Presidential candidates have appeared on 60 Minutes in October before Election Day since 1968. except for Donald Trump. And here is part of the explanation that Scott Pelley gave last night as to why Donald Trump dropped out of the appearance.
It's been a tradition for more than half a century that the major party candidates for president sit down with 60 Minutes in October. In 1968, it was Richard Nixon and Hubert Humphrey. This year, Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump accepted our invitation. But unfortunately, last week, Trump canceled. The campaign offered shifting explanations. First, it complained that we would fact-check the interview. We fact-check every story. Later, Trump said he needed an apology for his interview in 2020. Trump claims correspondent Leslie Stahl said in that interview that Hunter Biden's controversial laptop came from Russia. She never said that. Trump has said his opponent doesn't do interviews because she can't handle them. He had previously declined another debate with Harris, so tonight may have been the largest audience for the candidates between now and Election Day.
All right, Claire McCaskill, I'm going to let you take this one. What do you make of first of all, the way Scott Pelley had to explain what happened between the campaign and 60 Minutes and Trump not being a no-show on 60 Minutes?
Yeah, let's set aside whether or not you think Trump is a worthless liar and a jerk and not a redeemable human being. Let's just put that over to the side. And let's be honest about the Donald Trump of today versus the Donald Trump of 2016 and the decline that has occurred. Does anyone believe that Donald Trump in 2016 would be turning down debates and turning down appearances on 60 Minutes? No, he wouldn't. He has lost confidence in his own ability. Clearly, this guy, I mean, you can call it cowardice, it is. You can say he's a big scaredy cat, he is. But it all comes down to his insecurity that he is no longer capable of being judged side by side with Kamala Harris. He doesn't want that comparison. He knows he is not doing well when they are side by side. And he also knows that he's having difficulty always staying on topic, and his wanderings and all of the cognitive problems you're seeing with Donald Trump. He knows it. He may not be admitting it even to himself. But that's why they're coming up with all these bogus excuses, why he won't debate, why he won't appear on 60 Minutes, why he only goes to places that he knows will protect him from himself.
Yeah, Trump hasn't sat for any sort of adversarial interview in months upon months. And certainly Kamala Harris got the best of him in their debate. He's taken it to social this morning, criticizing her appearance on 60 Minutes. We'll spare you the nonsense he said. But, Mike, I want to pick up on what Claire said. It's not just about him being afraid of that contrast with Harris. He clearly is. But it is, just from a political point of view, a missed opportunity. There are only 4 weeks to go. We know that he's campaigning only in friendly confines, both in interviews and rallies. And yes, this is going to be a turnout election. It's about driving out your base. But there is still a slim sliver of undecided voters who are going to matter in this election. The only way to reach them, for the most part, are moments like this, set pieces. Well, he's skipping a second debate. He skipped this interview last night. It is, and just in terms of raw politics, you need votes, and he missed a chance to court some.
You're talking rationally, though.
I do that from time to time. It's a problem.
You're talking rationally about what a candidate would do to seek those missing voters, to seek them out, to focus on them. We're not talking about a rational human being here in Donald Trump. We're talking about a guy who sees people who need help, and he views it as, how can this help me? I want to help myself through their suffering. He wakes up nearly every day like a missile seeking damage. He's seeking to do damage. He's done damage in Springfield, Ohio. He's doing damage down south during the hurricane, specifically for North Carolina. And that's who he is. And to Claire's point about his, he lost his fastball if he ever had one. He certainly has. You can see that and you can hear that. Your ear can hear that in his ramblings. But I think the biggest thing that has frightened him and further damaged him is the specter of being on a stage or being contrasted, even though they're not next to each other, every single day against a woman, a black woman,
Younger, much younger.
Yeah, but a young, attractive black woman. And I think that drives him even crazier than he already is.
Well, and of course, he can say what he wants about her. He has. He's talking about how she's mentally, incapacitated from birth or something like that. And yet,
she seemed pretty good in that interview.
In 2014, he contributed to her campaign, said some nice things about her.
Right.
And so I do think it's the contrast. And I will say, I don't even think it's quite as much about her being black, her being a woman. I think it's the age disparity, because this entire campaign for 2 years has been built around Donald Trump being the younger of the two candidates. He may have been 78, but Joe Biden was 80, 81, had slowed down significantly. And that was the contrast he liked.
Yeah.
I remember. And in politics, so much of it is just like this, right? So I'm watching football game right after Kamala Harris gets into the race, and they show a split screen. And I went like that. Kamala Harris, 59, Donald Trump, 78. And you could really see the difference there. And I
absolutely agree with you.
I think he doesn't want the split screen, and I think that's why he's afraid to be seen in a debate on Fox News or an interview on 60 Minutes.
And I'll add to that. I definitely think that's part of it, because he's all about the look and the feel of it all and the brand. But I also think, just having known him over the years, us both, that he is still trying to get over the trauma of standing on a debate stage with her and having her name military leaders, economic experts, and literally turning to him and they say you are a disgrace, right to his face.
Right.
And I think that's just, hearing that truth about not just his policies, but the way he's behaved over the years, in front of millions of people, hearing the truth is impossible for him. Well, he can't do it again.
And again, Jonathan Lemire, you followed Donald Trump for a very long time. And I will go back, for those who haven't heard it, 28 times, go back to say that if you read what Dr. Brzezinski always said about the Soviet Union, he said they can't beat the United States head on. The United States is superior economically, it's superior militarily, it's superior politically, it's superior culturally, in every way it's superior. So the old Soviet Union, they had to be disruptors. They had to play by different rules. They couldn't beat us head on, so they had to disrupt. And we see it describes exactly what Vladimir Putin's doing. And domestically, you can say Donald Trump has always been a disruptor. Yeah. You put him on the stage with 16 Republicans in 2016, and they were all kind of looking like this. Every one of them looked foolish. They didn't know how to respond to the disruptor. Joe Biden, a creature of Washington since 29, a creature of Washington who played by the the Marquess of Queensberry rules. Always thrown off, always anguished by this disruptor who didn't play by the rules. Donald Trump is now the victim of disruption, of political disruption. They changed the candidate on him. He thinks they changed the rules on him. He planned for this, and his feet are still in cement. He's never figured out how to get those feet out of cement, because it was the Democrats this time who were the disruptors against Donald Trump. First time that's ever happened to him in politics, in business, in media, in tabloid wars, you name it.